genesis of this was with the Woodstock anniversary coming up. We thought that we could use that as a backdrop for something to have children and parents talk and communicate. It started with a number of posters, vintage posters from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which you'll see as we walk through, and that was one of the components. We then had, as we started to do our research, we realized there was some rich history in this community. We started to reach out to groups like the Orange Monkey with their vinyl store, to the Starlight, who had their own posters, and you'll see here. And we had a number of components, and then we realized we didn't have the curatorial expertise at the Children's Museum, and we reached out to the fabulous Virginia Eichhorn from Clay and Glass. And we met with Virginia, and we said, here's what we're trying to do around communication, the generations, and so on. We met with, Virginia and I met with our own 17-year-old children, and another man and his 17-year-old son. And we started talking to them about how the turmoil of the late 60s, leading up to 69, the Vietnam War, the assassinations, the women's feminist movement, the civil disobedience, and all of these things culminated with a pretty tumultuous time. And as I provoked these teenagers, I said, our response to that, our revolution to that, was Woodstock in a way. And for those 3 days, peace and music took over, and I think in a way it helped end the Vietnam War. It helped move some of these things like women's, the feminist movement forward, and it just paved the way. And that revolution, as I say, was Woodstock. Virginia wrote volumes of paper as she interviewed these young people and so on. As they started to, we asked them, what is your cause? What do you want to do about it? And it was really interesting what came out of 2009 and this generation. Things like gay rights came out strong, safety in the school and on the streets. And this isn't in downtown Toronto, this is in Waterloo region. It was really interesting, just a small focus group. We then took it to a broader group of students from Eastwood, and Virginia amassed her research and so on. The output of all of that is what I think is a really amazing exhibit called Talkin Bout My Generation, Youth, Revolution and Music Changed the World. And oversimplifying it, this room is about my generation, and as you wander about here, you will see some historic mention of the past. You will see some of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame posters beside the album artwork. These are quite amazing in their own right in terms of artwork. There's a short video that takes you back to the time and talks. Parents can communicate with their kids about that was John F. Kennedy and that was Martin Luther King, and there was things going on, and you see people in here communicating with their child and so on. There's all sorts of wonderful little examples. Here's some actual tickets from Woodstock, and for those who know, within the first afternoon of Woodstock, the gates were knocked down, the fences were knocked down, and they never sold these tickets. These were in a vault ready to be sold, so that's why they're in pristine condition. This jacket is from somebody who went to Woodstock, hitchhiked across Canada wearing this jacket, and it's just a sign of the time. Virginia added some amazing photographs from a Canadian photographer, Barry Wetzel. These are Tina Turner and Bob Dylan in this particular collaboration. This one's about civil disobedience, and so there's a number of things. Dylan was the voice for that, and you've got images from magazines here from Rolling Stones, the American Revolution, and just the whole civil disobedience of the time. This little section is around women's liberation, and you see the amazing Tina Turner, Janis Joplin, some original Rolling Stone magazines and so on, with some of the posters from the Rock and Roll Fame, and of course Diana Ross. There are all sorts of interesting little pieces of memorabilia here. There's albums and magazines and original tickets. This little Mariposa rock rock and mole, as it's called here, is goes back almost 40 years as well. And for those living in the region, they'll see in the middle left a youthful Susanna Doyle having a wonderful time at Mariposa. People came out of the community with these little gems of history, if you will. And there's tickets, as I say, there's 3 different groups that played at Woodstock that were here last weekend for the Blues Festival, which was kind of neat, including Can Teat and David Clayton Thomas, Alvin Bishop. So when people come here, they'll see some snapshots of that. We also worked with the Fashion History Museum for a second time. Jonathan Walford and Ken Norman have an awesome collection of fashion, about 10,000 different gowns and dresses. And Virginia asked them to pull together some things that would represent the 60s. These are awesome. And it's really great to see, to hear people say, I had that. These are authentic gowns and dresses and so on. Jeans, obviously, that was very important back then. The snapshot couldn't be complete without a reference to the Beatles. This actually is a collection from a former colleague and friend of mine in Toronto. As a young man living in England, he went to see the Beatles before they were big. And he showed me that they were on for 18 minutes, and he had the song list that they played. And afterwards, he went up and got their autograph, which you can see here. And he took his camera. And these are his own personal pictures of that day. This was Paul McCartney, and there's some of John Lennon and George and Ringo and so on. But those autographs are probably worth about $12,000 or $15,000 today. And it's if you're talking about my generation, you have to have the Beatles in there in some manner. There's some interesting merchandising of the Beatles, which Virginia wanted to talk about. This is a certificate which states that inside that little frame, is a piece of John Lennon's hair. And then, of course, for those who grew up in the Toronto area, the chum charts and so on were so important to the youth of the day. And these are nylon stockings, endorsed by the Beatles, or their likeness. So we have these little pieces. This one ran right after Woodstock the following year, the Isle of Wight festival in England, and was quite popular. But Woodstock here was the major launching point. And as I said, it was our revolution, my generation's revolution. Who made the song Talk About My Generation famous and played it at Woodstock. You see them as babies there. This is one of the original posters from Woodstock. And what we have here is some YouTube and other videos talking about the issues of that day. The writing on the wall, again, it's all about communication. It's from people that you have, authored by people who you would recognize your name. And as we go into this smaller room and sort of the end of the exhibit, the writing on the wall changes in terms of color. And these are words that were authored by Waterloo region youth in the last 6 months. And they're very, very powerful words when people come and take a look at this. They're caught off guard in some cases about what today's youth are thinking. And I mean, how tentative they are. This one over here, I wouldn't go to a protest as I'm afraid I'd be the only one to show up. I mean, that speaks volumes. There is some reference to youth from this community that created and brought music here. The Underground Railway was created by Joe Riccia. In '69, he was at the University of Waterloo and created, became a promoter and brought huge acts into this community. Many of his posters and memorabilia are hanging at Ethel's. Glenn Smith at Ethel's was a huge supporter to this exhibit, as was Joe. And as we sort of wind down here, what I wanted, what just is the best example of how brilliant Virginia is. This is a poster from 40 years ago, and this is a poster from this year at the Starlight. And she's taken and matched the styles of art, and as Virginia says, they're talking to each other. And speaking of talking, you may hear as you get into into this sound spot here.
The way music has changed over the
You'll hear
years
some young
is,
people, and
I
I'll
think
stop in a
that
second,
we all
talking about issues today. Over there, there's one with people my generation talking. So that's Talking About My Generation. I'm very, very proud of it. I think this thing could hold up anywhere. It's a solid exhibit. Virginia is spectacular and amazing. And what she's pulled together with a very little budget and very little time is something that has people talking and has generations talking, and I'm just delighted that it's here.